do with my granddaughter. We had one granddaughter. We kept telling her she was our favorite granddaughter. And she was like 13 before she realized she was our only granddaughter. So it's nice to be the favorite economist because FMA has so many. So it's like, if there's ever another one, I'll get a run for my money. The issue coming forward, obviously, is what 2013 looks like compared to 2012. And economists are not notorious for being happy-go-lucky types. They don't call this the dismal science for nothing. But of late, economists are sounding a whole lot more optimistic about 2013 than one would expect. There has been a number of polls. You get them this time of year. I mean, it's just, you know it's coming. It's all the forecast for the coming year, as if there's really a difference between January 1 and December 31st, but we get all excited because it's a new year. And the polls are starting to come out. And for the most part, the expectation is that next year will be quite a bit better than this one, that we're going to see growth by the end of next year somewhere in that 2.5 to 3.5% range. It may start slowly and build, or it may start relatively quickly. It kind of depends on some key issues that you've been hearing a little bit about of late. So to start with this, the kind of the elephant in the room from an economic perspective is the fiscal cliff. Are we going to do with Thelma and Louise and go flying off the fiscal cliff and ruin ourselves forever? Or are the good men and women of Congress going to quit behaving like kindergartners and get something organized? There are sort of four scenarios floating around right now. Two of them are absolutely miserable, and the other two are semi-acceptable. The miserable alternative is that these idiots can't figure out what to do and end up ruining everything, and we go over the cliff and taxes go up and spending is slashed and all this sort of stuff, and we suddenly go into an austerity-led recession. And something that the Congressional Budget Office would predict to last anywhere from 2 to 3 quarters. And the CBO, by the way, is a pretty nonpartisan group. I mean, they are not given to sort of backing either political party's point of view, and they're becoming almost apoplectic with their predictions. It's kind of like the world is going to come to an end and it's going to be a gigantic collapse of all structural, it's just, they're pretty bad. And there is probably a 10% chance that this would happen. Now, the realistic rationale for not expecting the worst, these are politicians, and they know that we go back to the polls in 2 years. And if they have utterly and totally screwed us, we're not going to be in a great mood. And come 2016, there may be a situation where, we are going to elect inanimate objects to Congress because they could not possibly do any worse than you. At one point, Italy got to this stage, and that particular election was interesting. The Italians elected 5 goats, 3 chickens, and a cow. And they were duly sworn in as members of the Italian legislature. So we may be getting close to that. Scenario number 2, which is equally miserable, is that there is a kind of ridiculously cobbled together last-minute deal that's worse than what we have now. That's not considered particularly likely because no one is in a especially negotiating mood right now, which kind of leaves the other 2 scenarios, one of which is probably the most likely and maybe the least damaging. Of these sort of upbeat scenarios, there is the possibility that in this lame duck legislature, you get some kind of last-minute deal, and the 2 sides come to some agreement which would basically involve kicking the can down the road and basically saying, we're not ready to deal with this, but we don't feel like collapsing the economy right now, so we're going to give it another year or 2 or 3 or maybe 4. The idea being, when can we push this off so that it'll be a good political discussion at that point? So it would either be pushed 2 years out so that it becomes part of the 2016 campaign, or it gets pushed 4 years out so that it becomes part of the next presidential campaign. Aren't we excited? So that's given maybe a 40% chance. Kind of depends on how much this current Congress wants to leave the issue to the next Congress, which is not markedly different from this one. Probably the most common scenario right now is the brief plunge. This is letting all of this stuff happen, and then the new Congress picks it up in January. The logic being that it is a lot more politically feasible to reinstate tax increases than try to deal with the whole thing that exists today. So when the Congress comes back together in January, it can say, we're going to reinstate the tax deductions for the middle class, for the working class, whoever we want to give them to. We just won't do them for the people that we don't like. So it would be more politically risky, for example, to have a bill specifically giving tax breaks to the wealthy, because then it would be on record as having, right now, if you vote for reinstating and keeping the tax breaks, you can say, well, I'm not really doing it for the wealthy, I'm doing it for everybody. But if they pull out just the wealthy part, then, so you get the idea. It becomes a political issue.